On the night of January 4th, plans were carefully laid for the recovery of the second casualty. A 6-man military team of volunteers, comprised entirely of the victim's fellow cadremen, was organized and briefed. It was decided that a blanket would be less unwieldy than a stretcher. The team worked in 2-man relays. The first pair, accompanied by a health physicist, entered the support facilities building and carried the body from the reactor operating floor to the control room. The second pair took over at the reactor control room to bring the victim outside, then carried him out of the SL1 area through the perimeter gate. A health physicist measured the direct radiation exposure to the driver. On the afternoon of January 5th, an official photographer, accompanied by a health physicist, entered the high radiation zones at the outer edges of the reactor operating floor to obtain needed still pictures. This was repeated on January 8th with another photographer. Working in radiation fields of 500 rentgens per hour, the 2 photographers were limited to 30 seconds of picture taking each. Using these photographs and other information, careful preparations were made for the recovery of the third body. An Army Radiological Assistance Team from the Dugway Proving Grounds, Utah, offered to assist in the recovery effort for practical experience and training. A quick series of briefings prepared them for their role in a carefully coordinated plan to free and remove the third victim. The third body could not be removed by direct methods. It was situated where radiation levels were most intense, directly above the reactor. Also, there was concern that a heavy shield plug, blown from the reactor vessel head into the ceiling, might fall on the reactor and jar dislodged fuel elements into a second critical mass. The only recourse was to improvise a long mechanical arm that could breach the freight doors at the second-story level of the reactor building, retrieve the body and shield plug as they were dislodged, and lower them to the ground. A hastily fabricated wedge on the boom of a mobile crane was used to pry apart the sliding freight doors. Then a 5 by 20-foot stretcher-like apparatus was fastened to the crane's jib as a catching net. Specially designed and fabricated for this recovery operation, it was carefully maneuvered into the narrow space between the top of the reactor shielding blocks and the monorail of the overhead crane. Here, and during subsequent remote control operations, H.K. Ferguson Company, a construction contractor, rendered extensive support. Finally, 5 nights after the accident, 22 volunteers working in relays succeeded in removing the body from the reactor building. On the morning of January 9th, it was transferred from the stretcher to a cask and transported to a shielded facility for decontamination. Medical studies showed that 2 of the men were killed instantly, and the third died of multiple injuries received at the time of the accident. An 8-man medical monitoring team from Los Alamos Scientific Laboratory assisted NRTS physicians in decontamination of the bodies. Gamma-emitting particles embedded by the explosion greatly complicated this work. Considerable success was achieved, however, by washing and scrubbing, including the use of detergents. The use of melting ice proved to be an effective automatic washing technique that minimized radiation exposure time for medical team members. The lining of standard metal caskets and vaults with lead sheeting resulted in final gamma readings at the outer surfaces of the vaults not exceeding 300 millirentgens per hour generally. This was sufficiently low to permit shipment. On January 13th, the bodies were released to the Department of Defense, which then arranged for burial services in accordance with wishes of the families at private and national cemeteries.